Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Optimizing Your Labor by Controlling Your Inputs with Jiffy Flexistart. I am Chris Manning, Associate Editor for Greenhouse Management Magazine, and I'm really glad that you could join us today. In this webinar, we're going to hear from Miguel Meneses, Substrate Product Manager, and John Bonin, Territory Manager, Product Manager, North America Substrate Mix Book from Jiffy. Before we get started, I just have a few housekeeping notes. This webinar is being recorded and will be available in a few days on our website. We'll have some time for questions at the end of this webinar, so please submit your questions at any time by using the Q&A function in your Zoom taskbar. The views expressed during this webinar are those of the speakers and not necessarily Greenhouse Management or GIE Media. This webinar does not constitute an endorsement of the vendor or speaker's views, products, or services. Now, I am pleased to introduce today's speakers, Miguel and John. Miguel has a degree in horticulture by the University of Algarve in Portugal and worked as a production manager from 1990 until 1995 at a French company producing annuals and perennials in South Portugal. Then he joined MD Bot, a Dutch potting soil company that would later form Tref BV, where he worked as sales manager for the Portuguese and Spanish market until 2005. From 2005 to 2008, he worked at Viveros Monterosa as director of sales, the leading exporter of annuals, patio plants, and perennials in Portugal. After a brief passage in a family business producing apples, in 2010, he joined Jiffy as sales manager for Spain and Portugal. In 2004, Miguel took a marketing position for small businesses post-grad at Lisbon Catholic University. And in 2016, he became the global product manager, substrates for Jiffy, responsible for substrate portfolio, substrate product technical advisory, and new raw materials. He holds a bachelor's in earth and environmental sciences and an MBA from Wilkes University. He is also a certified Lean Six Sigma Green Belt. He's been with Jiffy for 10 years and is currently the substrate mix product manager for the North American and Canadian market and the senior account manager for the Northeast United States. He's been involved in soil and water quality roles for the last 29 years and works with Jiffy's Canadian production facility that serves growers across the US and Canada. Prior to joining Jiffy, John worked at Syngenta in a plant health role. Now I'm going to turn it over to Miguel.
Hello, good morning. Thank you, Chris, for your presentation. Together with my colleague, John Bonin, we'll be talking today about Flexistart, this interesting line of substrates that will potentially change the way you work and produce your cuttings and your seedlings. It is basically a substrate, an enriched substrate, ready to use, that you can receive in a loose form and that you stabilize by compressing it into the tray and adding water. Nothing more, nothing less. This will improve your performance in those in amounts of material needed, the performance of your plants, the way they grow, your crop handling, and will optimize your labor. It is highly flexible product. It can work with virtually any flat filler, tray sizes, cell sizes, doesn't matter if it is for cuttings or for seedling, and will adapt to any transplant machine. You can do basically a full range of indoor and outdoor crops, vegetables, ornamental plants, perennials, you name it. You can adapt it to any tray and cell configuration and will allow you to change from tray type on the fly. You can produce just in time. No need to stack up inventory of filled trays like with most other systems. You just produce what you need at the moment you need it. Because of the additives we are putting on the substrates, you can also very precisely form a dibble for your seeds. Also, because it will keep that shape, the seed will stay in place and will be at a very precise depth. because the material is soft and not hard, you can easily stick your unrooted cuttings all the time. Now, what is the target for this line of substrates? As mentioned, the crops can be annuals, perennials, grafted vegetables, transplant vegetables, you name it. Potentially every stage or every type of plant can be used in this. You can adapt it to isotransplant machines, seeders, flat fillers, manual sticking, automatic sticking, doesn't matter. The type of propagation media is important here. Being Jiffy, a world lead company in terms of substrates, the quality of the substrate is essential. This does not work with just any substrate. You need a very, very particular type of peat that has the right balance between sponginess and flowability. And you need that to work in a consistent way all the time. So what is the problem that we are going to solve? As mentioned before, most soil line setups are not so efficient. They do not supply a steady flow of trays at the pace you need it. If you have some kind of paper plug or any pot that you use, you are forced to work in advance. Otherwise, you cannot keep up with demand. You cannot have all the trays needed at once. This will solve that problem because you can work with your normal flat filler. You will save on labor because you do not have you can or easily work with a fully automated system that is low tech, not complicated, and does not break down. You can potentially save on the labor intensive propagation stages because you can automate the sticking. This system is compatible with that. Seeding lines are perfectly adapted to this tray filling system. So you can do that perfectly without any incompatibility. You don't risk having one cell misaligned or too high or too shallow or too low or in some way out of place. Every seed will have the right place to be put, and it will be done in a consistent way. Very important, you can do the smallest sizes. 288 cells are very common, but you can go even for smaller sizes because this system does not require that you do one by one. You fill one tray at a time, and the mix is prepared for even smaller plug sizes. Now, the goals. When we stabilize the media, that in a way that improves production and improves the material flow of your chain, of your production chain, you reduce your labor, and you do that in a consistent way. For that, we need to have some training with the users. How to fill the tray, how to measure the tray output compared to the existing solution, evaluate if you're using a robotic planting, evaluating how well it does, and we have done that routinely, and the system in many cases allows for a higher plantation pace than with alternative systems. You're going to reduce labor, and you're going to see stabilization, rapid plug stabilization after a few hours on your plugs. Your productivity rate will go up, even if you're using unrooted cuttings. Now, to further discuss this, I'd like to invite my colleague, John Bonin, and he can show us around some pictures that he brought from some users. John, please join us.
Thank you, Miguel. Can everybody hear me okay? Hopefully they can.
I will scroll the photos as you say.
Okay, can you go back one? Okay. With Jiffy being a worldwide leader of global substrates and able to ship product worldwide, we offer varying sizes to accommodate all sorts of production lines, whether it be in Europe or other places in the world, particularly North America, South America, including the US. So here you see at one of our growers that participated over an extended period of time with us on their production line and on their inline system is what we consider a big bale shipped from the Netherlands. So we can customize this in terms of sizes to 212 cubic meter bales, all the way down to a 50-liter bag based on the size of your operation or the size of your production or the crops that you're growing. Next slide, Miguel. Here you see the tray being filled, and with the production that was taking place here, the customer and grower felt that a little bit of perlite would give him a little bit of added benefit without changing things internally when they were producing their crops on the benches and particularly under misting systems. The amount of perlite that was added did not affect the stabilization of the plug, in turn creating a little bit of more porosity. However, with the perlite as an additive, we were able to still get the stabilization we needed for plug production and for patching of the 288 trays here, as you can see. Next. Here you can see the 288 tray with the dibble in line. And I think this is a great aspect because one of the things we've noticed in production and working with R&D and our European colleagues as well is that when you look at the input flowing in line, the dibble that is made based on if you have a rolling dibble or you have a flatboard dibble as you see here, the dibble stayed in place, it stayed formed, allowing the seed to be uniformly placed and then grown on the benches, all in line. And that was a great aspect. No dibbles were off center, no seed was lost in germination from media, what I consider splashing down and covering the seed, perhaps preventing germination or delaying the uniformity of that tray. So everything that Jiffy had seen from the start was included within the dibble and the placement of the seed. Next, Miguel. Here you can see further going through where the seed was being input into the trays. Again, it's a little bit hard to see from this photo, but the dibble held its shape without any wash down as the seed was flowing through production and then into the greenhouse on the benches. Here you could, if you go back one, Miguel, one more, there you go. Here you can see the seed being placed, and it is a little bit hard from the photo to see, but the dibble is perfectly aligned in the center of every cell. That was one aspect that the grower had communicated very effectively, that they had problems getting that dibble to hold, as well as seed placement with the other mixed types that they were using. Next, Miguel. Here you can see after seeding, the tray is going in and it's receiving moisture before being placed on carts and then into the greenhouse for further misting and then growing on for stage 2. Here you can see after it has gone through its inline production, moistening, seed placement, as well as additional moisture after sowing of the seed, you can see that the cell shape has held to the shape of the media. So in other words, the media basically becomes the shape of the cell. And that is a great aspect here, as you could see with the cell that's there. And what this will lead to, and I think you'll see further on, not only for patching, but for also grading as well of certain perennials. And one aspect I wanted to bring up too, which Miguel had touched on before in working with all sorts of crops, and we can't forget the crop of ground covers. A lot of growers, depending on where they're at, will produce in a 200 cell or will produce even in a smaller cell based on density and based on how many they may transplant up to a flat or a container. It works well on ground covers as well. Next slide, Miguel. Here you could see only after a few days, and this was done on marigold particularly, to follow through the quick patching. Some growers patch marigolds based on the tray size or based on the length of time through germination and what they're doing with their finished product. Some will hand patch marigold trays, some will hand patch zinnia, etc. This research was conducted on marigold, and then in turn, second and third phase of the trial was conducted on vinca and miscellaneous other crops as well. You can see here on the extraction of the marigold from the bottom up that the media does take the shape of the cell, therefore creating stabilized media in and around that root structure. Next, Miguel. Again, based on patching, based on quick turns, based on limited labor pools in the springtime, the next phase in R&D that we looked at was how soon can product be patched, how much media would still be stabilized in the patching process, and then what would that translate to in terms of speed and efficiency on the line. Here you can see that the plug as extracted on the line perfectly fits the shape of the cell size. So here the grower had noticed less media loss. They noticed less patching after the fact of running it through their equipment, in turn being able to allocate labor elsewhere in the greenhouse operation, creating more efficiencies. Next, Miguel. And as you can see here, and again, I'll touch on labor, and we all know the labor issues that are existing right now. Works very well, as Miguel pointed out early on, with automation. Here you can see automation being done in a very similar hard structure type tray with cuttings. What we noticed with cuttings is that, again, we saw an increased enhancement of rooting. We saw more efficiency because everything was done in line. So there was a reduction of labor in terms of the handling of the extra or the pre-filled trays from other products on the marketplace. And again, driving efficiencies and profitability back to the grower. Next slide, Miguel. Here you can see the placement of the cutting into the media. Again, works very, very well with automation. Next, Miguel. Here you can see two cuttings. One is a standard mix, one being the Flexistart mix. You can see the excellent rooting. No signs of showing any production issues. Again, we produce this in multiple mixes, from low pH to a high pH to a middle of the road pH. And all of our locations, including the R&D site, showed enhanced rooting, and the production capabilities from automation all the way through handling, particularly inline, showed an increase in efficiency and allocating labor costs elsewhere. Miguel, here you could see another trial that we did in terms of R&D. This was, I believe, a perennial echinacea. And here you can see the benefits of the uniformity on the tray to the left, or I'll consider it the tray in the middle, was much more uniform, much more compact than what it was trialed against. Therefore, creating much more efficiencies, less grading after the fact in terms of going to the next stage in finished transplant containers. Here is one of those crops that a lot of people have shied away from over the years, but in large scale production, it worked very, very well. So what you're seeing here now is a tray that was done in Flexistart without any amendments, using a specific grade of peat from the Jiffy plant in the Netherlands. So as you can see here on the left was a standard seedling mix, same stick week, same cuttings, same misting, same growing regimen in the greenhouse. And what you take away from this is, and what we saw also as well, was we noticed some collateral properties in terms of thickness of root, more rooting on a tough crop that not a lot of people are willing to produce because of the extended time you have it on your benches. So again, if you look at the left, less roots, thinner roots. You look at the right with Flexistart, much more enhanced, thicker, vigor roots. And all of these roots that we've seen, whether it was pansy plugs, whether it was echinacea, whether it was vinca minor, and you'll see that photo coming up sooner, the roots have a tendency in our stabilized media Flexistart to explode. There is no lag time from when callus and root expansion occurs to when a grower would need to transplant or ship a plug to other growers. Next slide, Miguel. Here you could see on some work that was done on the East Coast with a grower producing vinca minor. So I think one key aspect to take away is grower is using a 200 tray. And as you can see here, it's a pyramidal or cone typed tray. The photo on the left in my hand was extracted without any bottom effort or push up. And again, you could see that the Flexistart was moldable to the cell and the excellent rooting that was down. On this one, again, there was no amendments added such as perlite. You could see that the roots are not coming up from excess water and the media is well drained. On the right, you will see on the bottom left with the roots coming out of the tray, that is Flexistart. That plug on my left was extracted from those trays that we were looking at in the trial. You could see where the grower I'm with holding a tray, that is a competitive brand of media. So there was a big difference by about 5 or 6 days, maybe even more, that we noticed where he was able to transplant his vinca minor into his finished containers much sooner. And again, the roots just had an appearance of longer, thicker, and more distributed throughout the soil than the competitive brand that we trialed against. Again, leading us to a more uniform, easily graded out, much quicker turn using a stabilized media with Jiffy. Next slide, Miguel. That was all. Thank you for your time.
This was the last one.
Okay, we will hop into some questions now. The first one we have here is, and guys, just take them. Whoever wants to speak, we can go as long as you want to have a question. We'll just kind of let it flow here. Can Flexistart be made with any Jiffy substrate?
John, I'll take this one. Potentially yes. There are a few limitations on the type of substrate. The substrate in question must be adapted to the tray size and the necessary water holding and air content for the crop. But then we have a few requirements in terms of fiber type and sponginess and flowability. We know there are certain materials that will not perform well and cannot be used for Flexistart. And many, you can say that Flexistart requires a high quality peat-based substrate. We can have materials other than peat, but the basis must be high quality peat. In the trials in question, we had a blend of 3 types of peat, 3 completely geographical sources that and type of harvest system that can make that produce completely different type of peat. That is still necessary. In the past, we have tried 1 or 2 types of peat. It can be done, but it is trickier. So we have found out that the best and most reliable solution is to combine these 3 types of peat that will give a steady result over time. So in short, you cannot do everything, but you can do a lot of different substrates with Flexistart.
As a follow-up to that, if this is something a grower is interested in, is maybe using different substrates or whatnot. Is that something you guys can help walk the grower through and help them trial and figure out as they get going?
Miguel, I'll jump in and I'll take this one. Yes, Jiffy, with our worldwide resources and colleagues throughout the world, can certainly help a grower by being on the ground with them and looking and see what their operation is doing now, how they're doing it, and what are the key aspects that they're looking for after the fact. Not every mix is created equal, and a lot of different growers out there, depending on where they're at, have different water and fertilizer requirements. And that is something Jiffy has built a reputation on in working with the growers and looking at their inputs and then recommending the right mix for them.
So how soon with Flexistart can you notice plug stabilization?
After a few hours, you already see the binding occurring. Well, not the stabilization of the plug occurring. And after a few days, it is obvious that the material is staying together and keeping the shape. But as mentioned, after a few hours from trade filling, you already see clearly there is something going on.
And as far as availability and orders go, like what is the availability for Flexistart orders and what is the lead time?
Miguel, I'll jump in for this one from what we've seen here in the US. So we all know that there are some struggles out there with some suppliers, but what Jiffy has seen is from a reliability and a deliverability standpoint, we can readily produce an order and deliver an order depending on where you're at in the world. So for example, I'm based here on the East Coast. We can see orders made, shipped, and arrived within 6 to 8 weeks coming to the East Coast. From there, you would just add a certain period of time based on where you're at in the US in terms of how you would increase your lead time from there. But from a reliability, a consistent deliverability, and a consistent product to the door, you're looking at in 6 to 8 weeks.
We have a question from Mark Montville. He asks, how long does it take this media to become cohesive after irrigation?
Well, that's more or less the previous question. Let's say you start seeing some results after a few hours.
We have an anonymous attendee ask, to what do you attribute better rooting in Flexistart media? You guys have probably covered this, I think, a little bit in this presentation, but is there anything else on that we'd like to hit there?
I would say that the fact that we use high quality peat certainly plays a big role here. There is a tradition in Jiffy to use the best peat for each crop. So peat is not just peat. There are literally, at our location, dozens of different types of peat extracted from different depths of the peat bog, different bogs, different countries, different harvesting system. And each one will have a different structure, will have a different water holding capacity, will behave in a completely different way. So we just have to pick the right material for each mix. In this case, I believe a big part of the fantastic response the plants are giving is because of the high quality of the peat we are using. And that is standard across all Jiffy locations.
And if I could just add to that, I think what Jiffy does is they specifically choose specific fractions of peat when you look at cell size and you look at the structure of the peat itself. And I think when we work on the ground with growers, it allows us to put those aspects of into a mix in order to have a grower achieve better results.
Makes total sense. Henry Covemaker asked, is this organic?
This is not organic certified yet. We are taking care of that. Potentially, since the material, all the materials used, except some fertilizers that we can replace with an organic fertilizer, can be are from organic natural origin. potentially this can be organic certified, but the certification is still not there.
I assume that is something for you guys that requires research and a lot of legwork just to kind of make sure that it's done right when you're able to hit market with that.
Sorry, I could not understand the question.
No, so when you guys are pursuing something like organic, I'm assuming that to get that right, to make sure it's certified, everything's ready for the grower, that it takes some time to really do that correctly and get it to where you want it to be before you hit the market.
Exactly. Our factory is certified, but that's not the only thing that required. We need each and every supplier to give us a proof of certification, the organic certification of their materials. So, and that is a process that takes time.
And I would assume that is also different for a lot of this can be different for you guys as a company that obviously has a worldwide reach, but it's probably different between your North America markets and your markets in Europe as well.
Exactly. In Europe alone, there are literally dozens of different organic certifications. The basic one that we use, it's what we call the Europe-wide certification, which is very similar to the US OMRI, not so much the Canadian OMRI. So when we have the first step, which is the European level certification, we can almost count for sure that we can have it OMRI.
Yes, and if I could just add, being involved in the certification and the OMRI certificates process over the last several years, that can take anywhere from 6 months to 14 to 15 months. So there's a little bit more time and effort involved on all parties for the organic mix that some of the growers are looking for right now. So that does take more time. And the process, based on how Miguel had talked about with the certification documents, et cetera, from some of the suppliers where the inputs may be coming from.
We have had a couple of people ask about how Flexistart compares to Performa media. So I don't know how you guys would like to answer that. Who would like to answer that?
John?
Sure, I can respond to that. And if any other additional, questions, if we're running short on time. Basically, they are two different products with different uses across different greenhouses, across different operations, used in totally different ways, for example, controlled environment, ag, etc. So I'll approach it from a stabilized standpoint and Flexistart first. Flexistart is not a bonded media like Performa. That's a very, very key difference. Flexistart was developed through R&D within the Jiffy organization to give growers who have a lot of automation and processes internally to allow them to reduce labor or position that labor elsewhere in the greenhouses without having a lot of pre-filled or wrapped plugs on site, etc., reducing your accounts payable, reducing the amount of space that you would need either inside your facility or outside of your facility, and then particularly the handling on the other end. So completely different product, completely different use than Performa. Performa is unique in its own way in that it is truly a bonded product that Jiffy produces around the world in various locations. This bonded product, and I always use the example, is like a frozen ice cube. You can't alter the pore space. You can't change the pore space based on if you're doing seed, cuttings, perennials, annuals, or even forestry or nursery product. Again, clearly unique and bonded, and it can be used in secondary automation processes, but it also has its benefits in terms of quick turns, faster than a loose fill media or faster than a Flexistart media. And particularly when you look at the handling aspect of it, that bonded media will not change shape. That's clearly unique to Performa. So again, there's two different uses, two different types of performance that you will get out of each one with different characteristics. So although some may consider them the same, myself, I do not consider them the same. They are used differently across different operations throughout the world.
To move on here, we have a question from Hartmut. To buy Flexistart, do I have to buy the end product, or can I mix it at home?
You have to buy the substrate. You have to buy the substrate from Jiffy and you apply it to your trays. You cannot buy the separate ingredients from Jiffy.
He also asks, in time of peat-reduced substrates, how does Flexistart work with wood fiber or cocoa peat mixes?
We are not on that. Peat reduce is no problem, up to 50%, no problem. Then it's more than just saying it's wood fiber or cocoa peat mixes. It's the exact type of wood fiber, the exact type of cocos that we can use. So we can do it probably 100% peat-free, but we will need some specific cocoa types and some very specific wood fiber and other materials. But yes, and up to 50%, no problem.
Diego, with Diego on the call, who asked a similar question, but Diego also asked, does it need compression at tray filling? Do you have to do any compression at tray filling with this?
Yes, you need some compression. Typically, if you are going to do seedlings, you compress more. If you're going to do cuttings, you compress less. When you do seedlings, you normally are in control of your irrigation because your seeds, you do not transpire in an uncontrolled way. They will form a root before you have your leaves. So you can be more precise with the amount of water. So you can afford to have a more compressed material that will be less aerated because there is less water. That's less of a problem. And that will allow you to do an early transplant, a mechanized early transplant for patching, for example. If you're doing cuttings, you normally go for a lower compression that will keep a higher hair content that can deal with the potentially momentarily excess of water. That plant normally you leave it there for longer, so you don't transplant after just a few days. You transplant after the fully rooted 3 weeks or 4 weeks, or some cases I think the fastest crop is 11 to 12 days, something like that, because it roots very fast in the Flexistart mixes.
Yes, and Chris, if I could just add on that too, is when you talk about compaction, you're also getting a little assist from the type of the drum roller or the type of seeding that you may be doing based on your dibble as well. So that is one aspect that you have to look at too, is that you are getting a little bit of assist from that operation when you're sowing your seeds.
And just as a note, as a follow-up to clarifier, guys, I think if a grower does want to work with Jiffy, explore Flexistart, this is something where if they have, when they're getting into this, there's a lot of this technical advice that if it's not you guys specifically, that someone from Jiffy can really help a grower get through this and understand exactly what is right for their operation, how this is going to work at their business. And this is something like a process you guys can really work hand in hand with them.
Yes, Chris, we can. We have an extensive amount of knowledge base within the Jiffy organization. We also have our R&D manager here based in the US, based out of Lorain, Ohio. So there's a lot of different aspects, either conference calls, teleconferences like this, or on-site travel that we can do to assist a grower. So we're always going to be there looking at how they do things, what they want to accomplish, and then what we have to work with them. And then we'll work alongside with them to ensure that they are successful using our product.
One other question here as we kind of move towards the end here. Again, if you have any questions, go to the Q&A at the bottom of your Zoom bar and list them in there. We had an anonymous attendee ask, can you speak about your production facilities and processes? I've seen that they say your one plant is state of the art. What makes it different than other facilities out there?
Well, our latest factory, so-called one plant in Zwijndrecht, the Netherlands, is probably, as they say, the most advanced substrate factory in the world. It was born in 2017, so we could finally incorporate everything that was possible. All our previous factories, they were 30 years old, 40 years old, and of course we kept on investing and modifying and upgrading, but this one was designed from the beginning with quality in mind. So we could reduce the number of times that any raw material is touched. So it's a multi-deck, several layers of factory, one on top of the other, to minimize the damage to the pit particles. We have a complete control of raw materials online. So we are with the very little people, we are always knowing exactly what processes are occurring from sieving, screening, what we call intensive treatments, milling in certain cases. So all those processes can be literally visualized by cameras, but also continuously measured as the batches are being produced. It works on a continuous flow. And yeah, it gives us absolute confidence to sell our substrates worldwide. I can post a link to our website where you can see some pictures of that, but I don't think the pictures make justice to that. The most important thing is what is going on the back, yeah, let's say behind the door, so to speak.
Yeah.
Yes, Chris, if I could just jump in here real quick, just to add to what Miguel said. You know, those who are attending today and those who will be hearing from Jiffy throughout the next couple of months with regard to Flexistart, this Flexistart was truly a global innovation within Jiffy. It had a worldwide effort from Europe to the US and back and forth. And it always involved from day one the new one plant, which Miguel had just touched on. So I think when you look at Flexistart and you look at, you may be hearing some new terms today, you may be hearing something new about a media that you might not have heard before. It is truly a global innovation within Jiffy. And it was something that came to light about probably 2 to 2.5 years ago. So it's not something that was just relatively, you know, looked at and trialed. It's been evaluated. R&D has looked at it. We've looked at the components. We've looked at the operation in terms of what one plant can produce. And then we worked on the ground with growers over the last, I think, 18 or 19 months to bring this product to market right now. And the first big release was at Cultivate last week. So it truly is an innovative product within the Jiffy Global network, and as well within the Jiffy global pipeline that is available in certain parts of the world. And as we all know, Jiffy is one of the leaders in global production and capabilities of media. And I think that's one key aspect to take away.
John, just as a follow-up to that, what was it like being back at Cultivate, back at a live event and getting to showcase all the work you guys have been doing in person with people for the first time, I'm sure in a long time, if not, you know, one of the first times? Yeah, no, it was great to be at Cultivate and see, you know, colleagues within Jiffy. You know, we had limited attendance within our booth from Jiffy as an organization based on, you know, how COVID still exists worldwide and what borders are open and what borders are closed. But it allowed us to interact internally as an organization and meet some of the key customers and talk to them about the last year and talk to them about some of the issues that they're experiencing. And I think as an organization, we all take away that, you know, Flexistart is hitting the market at the perfect time where labor is tough. There's a shortage of labor and a lot of people are investing in automation. And that's where Flexistart, I think, hits the mark immediately with some growers and in terms of our follow-up coming out of Cultivate. But again, in summary, it was great to see colleagues, it was great to see customers, and it was great to hear about a lot of the success stories out there in the last year, and particularly in terms of how our customers handled, you know, internally with their customers and externally with their customers, you know, COVID, and allowed them to continue to demonstrate and show resilience and success
in the horticultural industry.
We have one last question here, I think, unless anyone wants to drop in. We still have a little bit of time. So if anyone has any questions, go to the Zoom bar below, go to the Q&A and ask our excellent panelists here. But Hartman had another question. Up to what size is Flexistart working in terms of, I believe tray size here. So is there a maximum size you could use Flexistart with?
At this size, no problem. To 50 millimeters, we have done bigger than that. Of course, there will be a limit in which the forces involved will be too big, but we have still not hit the limit, so to speak. John, I think you have got to what, 2.5 inches, something like that, the biggest size that we have tried. I would say around that was the biggest that we have tried so far. But and I know there's some challenges with the deep forestry sizes. It's more difficult, but doesn't mean it cannot be done. So still has to be confirmed exactly what is the limit.
Yeah, Chris, and I could just add to that in terms of what we've seen with regards to certain cell size and certain tray types. I think we all look at quick turns in greenhouses now in operation, but one of the things I'll point back to in terms of the presentation was the begonia that was there. That was done in a 40 millimeter, and the results were spectacular and outstanding compared to another mix that it was put up against in the greenhouse. Same production, same method, same misting system, same fertilizer, etc. So I think from right now, what we've seen is you can stabilize and look at everything we need to do at that 50 size. And then as Miguel had commented, we had looked at some things probably 2.5 inches or so. But again, the larger cell structure that you're looking for may have a few limitations, but we can certainly drive a few of the key issues home based on what we've seen up to that certain point.
Guys, thanks again so much for your time today. It was great to hear about Jiffy and Flexistart. I just want to get both of your closing thoughts and we'll wrap this thing up.
Chris, I'll go first. I want to thank everybody for their time today and their questions with regards to the new product introduction of Flexistart. The big start of it was the kickoff at Cultivate this year with some great feedback from customers in talking with them and looking at labor and looking at automation and hearing the reinvesting that is going on within our greenhouse customers. And I think that's great to see that this product can have a benefit and can help growers achieve some of their goals that they have regarding internal production or plugs that are for sale through the broker network.
Miguel, anything you'd like to add as we wrap up? No, I think John has answered everything. I just want to thank everyone for their interest. We are available for information. I think that the Flexistart has a great future ahead. It's the right product on the right moment. And there is a learning curve on how to use it. It started as a much narrower project, and we have been widening it because we are seeing the possibilities. So some growers were fortunate to be with us, working with us from the beginning, and they are profiting from that. So the sooner you get involved in this, the sooner you can, learn how to use these fantastic benefits that we are providing with this Jiffy Flexistart substrate. Thank you all.
Everyone, thank you so much for attending. Thanks again to John and Miguel for leading this excellent discussion. They're going to reach out to Jiffy if you have any further questions, but everyone have a great rest of your day. And thanks again for attending this webinar from Jiffy.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for your time.